Hey guys, how you doing? I hope you're all well. So today I want to talk about the Thanos moment. What is a Thanos moment? Recently there are articles coming out one after another reporting how far emulation of PS3 has come along and how strong it is. Gamers and developers are using it and they seem to be very satisfied with the results. As they get better results, the more effort is put in to maximize the quality of those results. So now you might ask, how is that a Thanos moment? After Sony put themselves in hot water with the whole fiasco of no more discs and now it's all digital, they also pushed people's buttons and drove them to the edge. And naturally, people are fed up because it's not just the hardware that is expensive. I mean, everything's expensive nowadays, but you get my point. The promise that the digital media would be cheaper than the physical never came to fruition. So the consumers said, that's it, we've had enough. This approach is just full of greed. So you know what? You can keep it to yourself. We'll do it ourselves. With how well the PS3 emulation has been progressing, developers starting getting the same idea. Why don't we do the same to a newer console, the PS5? This mere thought has turned to actual development at an explosive rate, so much so that Sony heard about it and they made an announcement saying, "We have become aware of this sad news that PS5 games are being emulated online, and emulating games in general is illegal." Now, before I talk about the legalities, let me ask you this. How do you think someone goes out of business? How do you think a successful business stops flourishing? You see, there's something called fuck around and find out. When you abandon your players and everything becomes monetary value over quality of service, that's when everything starts to go downhill. PlayStation has been making bad decisions for a number of years now. So the accumulation of all that damage has to have some sort of repercussion and consequences. So you might say, well, Tom, PlayStation and Sony, for that matter, it's a giant corporation. They're not going to go out of business just like that. And yes, I'm with you. That's very much correct. They won't. At least not for now. But how do you think that starts? You see, this is a chain of events. After you push too much and insert unnecessary pressure for the sake of more money out of your customers instead of providing a better service, the very loyal and lifelong customers start turning on you because you betrayed their trust. So no, Sony's not going out of business anytime soon, but they're bleeding. Their stock rose on expected higher profits from going all digital. The executives sold into that strength for personal financial reasons. What do you think that does to people when they see it? When they see the trend, they can follow the breadcrumbs and connect all these dots together. PlayStation is losing customers and subscriptions daily, and on top of that, because they targeted people's nostalgia and started shutting down those stores and afterwards removed 500 movie titles that people rightfully bought and owned, they essentially created their own final nail to their own coffin. This is what I meant when I said a company goes out of business, because there are people who want to stand up in the face of corruption and do something. I'll give you a personal example. If you have watched my earlier videos, I've mentioned that I started this channel because I love games and gaming in general. And now, some big corporate fatsuit is trying to get in my way of enjoying it. One person does what I have done, and another one with expertise in games development starts creating emulation. And soon enough, you start hearing about it, like RPCS3. And then more and more people will join that person's side because they love their games and want to still enjoy and not fear that it would disappear out of nowhere because the company deems it's not beneficial for them to keep the stores online and whatnot. And then soon after that, that one person forms a company, gets a bunch of sponsors to back him up, and before you know it, he's providing you with an emulation service better than the original provider. Why? Because the original provider abandoned ship and everyone who survived said, you know what? Fine, I'll do it myself. There you go. That's the Thanos moment. And guess what? That one person, because he's like, well, I'm making this for myself to enjoy it, just like how I used to enjoy it when those companies cared and listened to us and gave us what we wanted. he starts doing it just for the love of the games. So not only he'll do a better job, but because he's a gamer and a developer, he'll put more effort and will actually listen to the player's feedback to make the quality better every time. If the emulation is better than the original provider, and I can run the exclusives on a PC, then the original provider of now horrible services is redundant. Now the legal stuff. Firstly, emulation isn't illegal. According to Section 107 of the US Copyright Act, emulators themselves are legal. In the late 90s, Connectix Corporation developed the Virtual Game Station, a software emulator that let people play official PlayStation games on Macintosh computers and then later on Windows as well. To make the emulator work, Connectix reverse engineered Sony's PlayStation BIOS, which is basically the copyrighted firmware that controlled the console's basic functions. This process required them to make temporary intermediate copies of the BIOS so they could study how it worked. Once they understood the functional requirements, they wrote their own compatible code. The final Virtual Game Station product contained none of Sony's copyrighted BIOS code. So here's the problem. Sony sued Connectix in 1999 for copyright infringement based on those intermediate copies, and they said it was also trademark tarnishment, claiming that the emulator damaged the PlayStation brand as a whole. A federal district court sided with Sony and issued a preliminary injunction that stopped Connectix from selling the emulator. But here's the thing. On February 10th, 2000, the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Ninth Circuit reversed the lower court in a unanimous 3-0 decision. The court relied heavily on the earlier landmark case of Sega Enterprises versus Accolade in 1992, which had already established that reverse engineering computer programs to access unprotected functional elements can be fair use. Guys, this is the important part. This is the keyword, fair use. Now, how does that play in this case? Like, how does fair use come into play? Firstly, the copying was informative. Connectix created a new product that let PlayStation games run on a completely different platform, in this case, Mac and PC. Computer programs like the BIOS contain both creative expression, which are protected, and also the functional elements, which are not protected by copyright. Connectix accessing the functional parts was legitimate. Now, Connectix copied the entire BIOS intermediately. However, because none of that code ended up in the finished product, this factor carried little weight. While Sony said PlayStation brand has been damaged as a whole because the emulator might reduce sales of PlayStation consoles, copyright law does not give Sony a monopoly over every device that can play its games. Legitimate competition is allowed. Now, why is this important? You see, developing emulators is not inherently illegal. Reverse engineering a console's firmware to achieve compatibility, when done carefully and without including the original code in the final product, can qualify as fair use. Intermediate copying necessary for that reverse engineering is protected. You see, the court recognized that allowing this kind of reverse engineering promotes competition and innovation rather than stifling it. PlayStation comes out and says it is illegal to emulate games online, which is ironic because you pay full price for a digital service that was promised to be cheaper than physical copies and then get issued a license, which is essentially a key, which they can revoke at any time for any reason, which basically enables them to have a monopoly over games, and it's them taking our right of ownership away. That's not illegal, but emulation that, based on established evidence, has been proven fair use is illegal. Like, how does that even... Like, I don't even understand when they issue these kinds of statements and announcements, do they even think with themselves, or they just, like, pick up their phone and go, oh, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to write this. They've had experiences. They've been in this business for a long time. I mean, even dumping a game or firmware that you personally own isn't illegal. Downloading someone else's dump or distributing your dumps is copyright infringement and illegal. But you get my point. They've pushed people to their limits, and every time they say something like, oh, we've heard about this sad news that people are emulating our games online, they're just gonna hear, if buying isn't owning, then piracy isn't stealing. That's it. That's the Thanos moment. A Thanos moment is what happens to a company when they say no to their loyal fans and lifelong customers and stop listening to them to line their own pockets with money. And hey, what can I say? I'm not surprised. If a company like Sony, who's been in this business as long as they have these illusions that they can do whatever they want and people won't do something about it, they got another thing coming. This is only going to get worse. This always reminds me of that clip from Gabe Newell saying they don't have a piracy issue or any problem that is related to piracy because that issue essentially rises from providing a bad service in the first place. But yeah, that's it. That's about it for this video. Let me know what you guys think about all of this, Is piracy gonna make a grand comeback, Yeah, that's it. As always, thank you for listening to me. I hope you have a good day. Take care of yourselves, and peace be with you.